The comments from the soldiers here are really, really emotional for me to hear after everything that we as a country have been through. And as a civilian, I have nothing but appreciation and thanks for everything that you have done and continue to do. And there are literally not words to describe how much admiration I have for both of you, as well as all of our soldiers currently serving in the IDF and who have served throughout all of history, but especially since October 7th. It's not something to take lightly, and I think you touched every single person in this room with the story of your heroism and that of your commander. First of all, it's a great honor for me to be here today. My name is Emily Schrader. As mentioned, I'm an Israeli-American journalist, I'm a human rights activist, and I'm also a proud feminist. Of course, Israel today faces an enemy in Gaza. The October 7th massacre made it clear to the entire world what we have always known, that Hamas is a genocidal terrorist organization that revels in barbarity. But while we are fighting Hamas, we must recognize that there is a much bigger evil behind all of this, one that has fueled the flames of war and terror for decades, the Islamic Republic of Iran. For years, I've had the privilege of interacting with tens of thousands of Iranians inside of Iran as a journalist. I've seen the cruelty of the Islamic regime in Iran, not just against those they label as their enemies, but against their own people. The Islamic regime is the single greatest threat to global stability and peace in our time. Their ambitions are not confined to their borders. They've spent billions to spread their oppressive ideology, to colonize entire nations through proxy militias, and to wage war, frankly, against freedom itself. Regime-funded Hezbollah has turned Lebanon into an outpost of terror. The Houthis in Yemen, another arm of the regime, have launched attacks that have disrupted global trade and endangered international waters. Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, fully supported, trained, and armed by Tehran, exist to destroy Israel and to maintain instability in Gaza and in Judea and Samaria. In Iraq and Syria, the Islamic regime has funded militias that terrorize civilians and undermine democracy efforts. And on October 7th, we saw with horrific clarity what those efforts have built: unimaginable cruelty, mass slaughter, and sexual violence as a method of war. I could stand here for hours talking about the depravity of this regime, but today in this room, we here as women, I want to focus on one critical truth. The oppression of women is not incidental to the Islamic regime in Iran. It is foundational to its ideology. Since 1979, the ideology of Ayatollah Khomeini has been rooted in an obsessive hatred of women. The regime fears the moral conscience of women, the leadership of women, and the freedom of women, because they know that women are the force that can push the Middle East forward. That is why they've led the world in the execution of women until today. That is why they shoot protesters in the eyes, to maim them, to break their spirit, to erase their power. That is why the sight of a woman's hair or a woman dancing threatens the very existence of the Islamic regime. Think of Nika Shakarami, the 16-year-old Iranian girl who was beaten to death by security forces for burning her hijab, or Mahsa Amini, murdered in custody because part of her hair was showing. Think of the thousands of Iranian women who have been imprisoned, tortured, raped, or killed simply for demanding to be treated as human beings. And think of what Hamas, an extension of this same hateful ideology, did on October 7th. The sexual violence we witnessed was not random. It was not just an act of brutality. It was strategic, it was ideological, and it was meant to send a message, not just to us, but to women across the world. But they're wrong. Because in this fight, there is no greater symbol of resistance to this darkness than an Israeli female soldier. There is nothing that shakes the very foundations of the Islamic Republic of Iran more than a Jewish woman in uniform carrying a rifle, defending her people and her homeland. Since the war began, more than 3,500 female IDF combat soldiers have fought on the front lines. They were there on October 7th, as you heard today, facing Hamas terrorists head on. Many paid the ultimate price that day, and since then, The women of the IDF have continued to step up to serve with unwavering determination, knowing that the fight we wage is not just for Israel, but actually for the future of the region. They even took part in the IDF strikes on the Islamic regime targets inside of Iran. Think about the power of that moment. An Israeli female pilot, an Israeli female intelligence officer, an Israeli female commander helping to plan and execute attacks against the regime that has been terrorizing women for 45 years. These women, 18, 19, 20 years old in many cases, carry the hope of entire nations, plural, on their backs. And they do it with dignity, with courage, and with strength. They elevate not just Israel, but the entire Middle East. The people of Israel and the people of Iran are not natural enemies. In fact, we're bound by a common struggle. We are the two nations most impacted by the regime's terrorism. And despite the high price, we are fighting for justice, not just for ourselves, but for an entire region. That is why when Iranians take to the streets, they don't chant for war against Israel. They're chanting no to Gaza, no to Lebanon, I give my life for Iran, because they know that their resources and their future, their very lives are being stolen by a regime that cares only for war and destruction, particularly of the state of Israel. And yet through all this, something remarkable has happened. The courage of Israeli female soldiers has inspired an entire generation of Iranians. Despite being raised under a system that teaches them to hate us, many of them now stand with us. A majority of them now stand with us, because they see in our female warriors not just soldiers, but symbols of a different future, a future where women lead, a future where women are free. In Israel, women are not just protected, they are protectors. They are pilots, commanders, intelligence officers, combat soldiers. They are shaping the battlefield, they are shaping our society, and they are shaping our future. And that is why we must support them. The work of FIDF is not just about helping our soldiers. It's about shaping, for me, it's about shaping a different future for the entire Middle East. It's about investing in those who carry our hopes and our dreams into battle. And while today we're talking about women, let me be clear. Supporting and empowering IDF soldiers, both men and women, is the key to our survival. The Islamic regime in Iran is already shifting its public rhetoric, pretending to seek diplomacy in recent days. But make no mistake, this is nothing more than a rearmament strategy. They're trying to recover from the losses that we inflicted on their terror networks in Syria, Lebanon, Gaza, and Yemen. They will not stop until the Jewish state is destroyed. And the threats they pose will not end until this regime falls. This war is far from over, but we're not afraid, because we have a shining light that will not be extinguished. We have heroes who show us the path forward, some of which you heard from today. Empress Farah Pahlavi, the wife of the late Shah of Iran, once said, "I am certain that light shall prevail over darkness." And she was right. We do not know what the future holds, but we do know that the spirit of our female soldiers, the spirit of those who stood against Hamas, of those who refused to be broken, will ultimately triumph. And we saw it most recently from the young women who held their ground on October 7th. We saw it from the lookout observers who gave their lives to warn others. We saw it in the resilience of Liri, Nama, Daniela, Agam, and Karina, who emerged from more than 480 days in Hamas captivity with strength, dignity, and defiance. And we will continue to see it until the darkness that threatens our world is eliminated. Because we are the generation of women, life, freedom, the slogan of the movement against the Islamic regime in Iran. And we will not stop fighting until freedom wins. Thank you.